Ele é um grande lutador, mas eu não preciso provar mais nada pra ninguém de quem eu sou, o que eu já fiz dentro da MSP Cage. Essa outra chegou numa oportunidade gigantesca, vou nocautear esse cara, essa é ela.
Pero não acho que quando sai de uma categoria você merece lutar direto pela outra, pelo título. Pero tem muitos caras que estão peleando em busca desse título, então um cara chegar e furar a fila.
Minus 370 favorite Touria is to beat Charles do Bronx Oliveira. Minus 370.
That is insane. That is not right.
Ilia Touria and Charles Oliveira are set to fight at UFC 317, and the verbal war has already begun. Charles Oliveira believes in his skills and is confident he'll finish Ilia Touria. Speaking about the upcoming matchup, Oliveira acknowledged the challenge but stood firm in his self-belief. He emphasized that his accomplishments speak for themselves and that he doesn't feel the need to validate anything. Looking ahead to the fight, Oliveira made it clear he's aiming for a decisive victory and is fully prepared to stop Touria.
What are your thoughts on Ilia Touria and Ilia Touria as a fighter? How do you feel about just the overall fight?
É uma grande luta, ele é um grande lutador, mas eu não preciso provar mais nada pra ninguém de quem eu sou, o que eu já fiz dentro da MSP Cage. Essa outra chegou numa oportunidade gigantesca, vou nocautear esse cara, essa é ela.
Who's gonna knock this guy out?
In another interview, Charles Oliveira made similar remarks, stating that he is ready for Touria's challenge and aims to prove the odds wrong. He looked excited for the fight and plans to knock out Ilia Touria. While he respects Touria, Oliveira is confident he will defeat the former featherweight champion. Charles Oliveira stated, "I have nothing but respect for Ilia Touria, but this is lightweight. I believe in my jiu-jitsu, but I believe that I could knock Ilia Touria out." On the other hand, Ilia Touria is still frustrated about not getting the fight with Islam Makhachev and said Charles Oliveira has to pay the price for Islam by stepping in. While he thanked Charles for accepting the fight and showed respect for him, Touria made it clear that he still plans to handle business. He acknowledged Oliveira's record for the most submissions in UFC history, but said he would choose the path to victory that causes the least pain out of personal respect for Charles.
Bueno, en primer lugar agradecerle a Charles, la verdad, por haber aceptado el reto, ¿no? Algo que Islam no hizo y tiene que pagar el precio por Islam. La verdad, me da mucha pena por Charles, pero bueno, al final del día es mi trabajo.
Charles Oliveira tiene el mayor número de sumisiones en la UFC. Dijiste que querías someter a Makhachev, no sé si quieres doblar la apuesta con Oliveira y someterlo.
No sé, con Oliveira la verdad que lo que sea menos doloroso para él, eso es lo que haré porque me cae muy bien.
Ilia Touria also shared his thoughts on Charles Oliveira as a fighter. He said he likes Oliveira and respects his great ground game and striking, though he doesn't find the striking special. Touria acknowledged that Oliveira is very dangerous on the ground and holds the record for the most submissions in UFC history. However, he believes Oliveira tends to give up quickly when he feels his opponent is more powerful. Touria said Oliveira doesn't keep fighting through adversity, but instead gives up fast, losing most of his fights once he's behind.
I like him, of course. He has a great ground game and striking, nothing special for me. In the ground, he's dangerous. He has the most submissions in the UFC history, I think so. Him? Yeah, I think so. He's a dangerous guy in the ground, but I think that he's the kind of guy that when he feels that you are more powerful, he gives up. He gives up like fast. I don't think that he's the kind of fighter where he finds like some adversidad. How you say
adversary?
That? Yeah, adversary that he keeps going. No, he's like, he gives up. 10 losses. 10. It's not 1, 2, 3, 4,
Can you go to his
5,
record? But
6,
I think it was
7, 8, 9. It's 10.
UFC lightweight fighter Mateusz Gamrot believes Charles Oliveira will knock out Ilia Touria when they meet at UFC 317. He acknowledged that Touria has the power to hurt Oliveira if he lands clean, but ultimately feels Oliveira's size, experience, and striking will be too much. Gamrot said Oliveira is simply too big and well-rounded for a featherweight moving up, and he sees the former champion finishing Touria in their title clash.
Who do you think wins, Ilia or Charles?
Interesting matchup. The both guys has changed. Like if Ilia
hit Charles Oliveira head, so he can knock him down for sure. But I think Oliveira is so big for him and for all-rounder fighter, and I think Oliveira will win this fight.
Mateusz Gamrot further said that Charles Oliveira versus Ilia Touria is a great fight and could be a 50-50 matchup, but leans toward Oliveira. While acknowledging that Ilia has the power to knock Oliveira out, Gamrot pointed out the size and grappling advantage Oliveira holds. He noted that Oliveira is the bigger, more experienced fighter, and that if the fight goes to the ground, it could pose serious problems for Ilia. Though he admitted Oliveira's performances can be inconsistent, Gamrot believes that on the ground, Oliveira holds a clear edge, and that might be the difference.
You think Oliveira's gonna win? I haven't heard a lot of people say that.
I think so. He's big. It depends how his performance will be in the fight, because sometimes he looks bad, but sometimes he looks fantastic. So I think that in the ground he will be much better for Ilia. Especially like the gabarit is much different. Oliveira is big guy. Ilia is small guy. So if Oliveira catch him in the ground, I think this is gonna be big problem. But like I say, Ilia can knock him out for him also, you know. So this is like 50-50, but I think Oliveira will win.
UFC legend Chael Sonnen was shocked to learn that Ilia Touria, making his lightweight debut, is the favorite to beat former champion Charles Oliveira. He said it didn't feel right that Oliveira, a former world champion who defended his title 3 times and holds the record for most submission wins in UFC history, is such a heavy underdog. Sonnen emphasized that Oliveira deserves more respect because of his achievements.
Minus 370 favorite Touria is to beat Charles do Bronx Oliveira. Minus 370.
That is insane. That is not right.
To be the world champion that defended 3 times, has more submissions than anyone in UFC history, and he's a minus 370 favorite.
Daniel Cormier also talked about this matchup and highlighted that Ilia Touporia's biggest strength right now is his confidence. He shared a conversation with Josh Thompson, who said Touria doesn't know how to lose, and that mindset drives him. Cormier explained that Touporia's strong self-belief makes him enter every fight expecting to win, which shows in his fearless and dominant performances.
Confidence is key. I think the biggest thing that Touria has right now is confidence. And I told Justin and I were talking about that. He goes, dude, he doesn't know how to lose, so he's so confident that he can beat anyone that he goes out there and he fights in the way that he did.
Meanwhile, the Brazilian featherweight John Silva has offered to help Charles Oliveira prepare for his UFC 317 fight against Ilia Touria, claiming he's the better fighter. He said Touria hides his back foot before throwing punches and often exposes his back after missing heavy hooks, as seen in the Bryce Mitchell fight. Silva stated confidently, "I'm better than you," and believes he performs at a higher level than Touria. John Silva stated, "I just know I fight much better than Ilia. I know he walks and hides his back foot to throw the straight or cross. I know he has powerful hips, but when he throws and misses a heavy hook, it often causes him to turn so much that he gives up his back." We saw that in the Bryce Mitchell fight. How many times did he give up his back? Let's be honest here. I'm better than you. That's why I haven't done the same. I did better than him. Former UFC champion Henry Cejudo said Charles Oliveira has been dropped by nearly everyone he's faced and questioned how he'll handle Ilia Touporia's knockout power. He highlighted Touporia's ability to mix up his attacks, going high, low, and to the body with dangerous precision. Cejudo recalled a fight where Touria got hurt at lightweight but came back to score a knockout, calling him the Matador. He acknowledged Oliveira's size and wrestling, pointing to his takedowns against Michael Chandler, but said, Oliveira must make key adjustments. Otherwise, Cejudo believes Touria will become a 2-division world champion.
Charles Oliveira has been dropped by just about everybody that he's fought. What happens when you go up against a dude that's knocking people out, not TKOing people, knocking people out cold like Ilia Touria? Ilia Touria goes high, low. He can go to the body. He can go up top. We saw him one time at 155 pounds where he did get hurt, but the Matador in him, he came back and he ended up knocking him out. Charles Oliveira is the bigger fighter, taking down Michael Chandler, taking down Justin Gaethje with those beautiful double legs. Charles Oliveira is the guy that has to make make those adjustments. If not, it's going to be the double champ. It's going to be Ilia Touria securing himself as a 2-division world champion.
Paddy Pimblett believes Ilia Touria has a strong chance of beating Charles Oliveira at UFC 317. He described Oliveira as a bit chinny and pointed out that with nearly 40 fights, he tends to take a lot of damage. While acknowledging Oliveira's skill on the ground, Pimblett also called him reckless. He highlighted the often overlooked difference between the featherweight and lightweight divisions, saying the jump in weight is significant. Since Oliveira is around the same height as him, Pimblett thinks the size difference could play an important role in a stand-up fight.
Ilia beats Charles then?
I think he might, to be honest. Charles is a bit chinny, isn't he? You know what I mean? He's had about 40 fights or something. He always gets punched. He always gets cracked.
Yeah.
So,
he's reckless, but he's super exciting.
Yeah, he is.
And he's dangerous.
Exciting. If he gets him down, I can see him winning, because that £10 difference is a big difference.
Yeah.
145 to 155, it's a big difference. People don't understand that because they don't watch the sport or they're not involved in the sport. But that £10 makes a big difference. And especially, like, Charles is like my height. Ilia's like down here when I stand up, you know what I mean? So it's gonna make a big difference.
Paddy Pimblett said Ilia Touria might be surprised by Charles Oliveira's size and presence in the cage. He explained that lighter fighters often underestimate how big their opponents are until they see them in person. Pimblett gave examples of Bobby Green and Michael Chandler, saying they looked much smaller than expected when standing next to them.
Ilia might get a bit of a fright at how big Charles is when he stands opposite him. Fighters do that with me, who fight at lightweight. You know what I mean? I'll never forget Bobby Green looking over at me and being like, "What? He's big, him." Same with Chandler. Like people thought Chandler was going to be bigger than me, and he just weren't.
Former UFC champion Michael Bisping broke down the potential fight between Ilia Touria and Charles Oliveira, describing Charles as a dangerous, aggressive fighter who constantly moves forward, throwing punches, knees, elbows, and looking for submissions. However, Bisping pointed out that this would be Touria's first fight at lightweight. He praised Ilia's punching power, boxing skills, pressure, and Greco-Roman wrestling, and said he wouldn't be surprised if Ilia came away with the win.
Ilia versus Charles Du Bronx Oliveira. We know Charles, he's a dangerous, aggressive son of a... He's going to walk forward, punches, knees, elbows, he'll lock on a submission. Ilia, this is his first fight at lightweight, and with the punching power of Ilia Touria, the boxing that he has, the footwork that he has, and the Greco-Roman wrestling, it wouldn't surprise me if Ilia pulls it off.
Michael Bisping described Ilia Touria as highly impressive throughout his career, praising his confidence and ability to turn ambition into reality. He noted that Touria has consistently finished his opponents in style and has rarely been in trouble during his fights. According to Bisping, Touria is usually the one delivering damage, not taking it. He believes a win over Charles Oliveira, who he expects Touria to be favored against, would be another major milestone in Ilia's career.
I would say Ilia Touria, given everything that he's done in the sport, the confidence that he's shown, the manifestation, as the kids say, but bringing it all to a reality, knocking out everyone in his way, doing it in absolute style, hardly breaking a sweat, not having to fight through any adversity, not being the hammer and the nail. He's just been the hammer, just hammering his way through everyone. If he beats Charles Oliveira, which I would assume that he's going to be the favourite to do, and that's with absolutely no disrespect towards Charles Oliveira.
MMA guru and Demetrius Johnson also shared their thoughts on the fight between Ilia Touria and Charles Oliveira. MMA guru called it a major pay-per-view matchup that doesn't need an interim or undisputed title to draw interest. While he acknowledged the excitement around the fight, he raised questions about how Touria would perform at lightweight. Demetrius Johnson pointed out that Touria is actually a big guy, walking around at about 191 pounds, and said it's surprising he ever made featherweight. Johnson believes the move to lightweight makes sense, and added that he always enjoys watching fighters move up in weight.
If Ilia Touria fights Charles Oliveira on a pay-per-view, that's a big deal.
Oh, it's gonna be bigger.
They don't need to wait for an interim belt. They don't need to wait for an undisputed, so yeah. I don't know how he's gonna do it lightweight though. Maybe you can speak on that. He's a smaller guy coming up.
It's a smaller coming up. It'll be interesting because he is bigger from when I heard him on the Joe Rogan podcast. Like 191, I think he was walking around. It's massive. So for him to cut to 145 seems almost like, how did he do that? But now that he's grown up to 155, I always like when athletes go up.
Islam's coach Javier Mendez said he would bet on Ilia Touria to beat Charles Oliveira, even though he personally wants Charles to win. He explained that Oliveira's upright stance makes him an easier target for Touria's low stance, pressure-heavy boxing. Mendes pointed out Touria's sharp ability to land clean shots, especially to the chin, as seen in his fight against Josh Emmett. He believes Touria would have more chances to land strikes than Oliveira in their matchup.
Ilia, power puncher, boxer, low stance versus Charles Oliveira. If someone gave you $100,000 to bet on that fight, who would you bet?
Ilia. But if you're asking who I would want to win, I'll put Charles. I'll put my money on Charles.
Yeah.
It's basically because Charles is going to stand in there upright, like you're saying, and Ilia's got a really good way of connecting with that chin. Really, really nice. Just like what he did with Bo. Ilia's got more opportunities than Charles does.
Javier Mendez explained that Ilia Touria would beat Charles Oliveira because of his strong inside boxing and ability to land clean, powerful shots. He said Oliveira's upright stance makes him an easier target and that Oliveira will have trouble taking Ilia down without using effective knees or front kicks. While Mendez acknowledged Oliveira's reach and kicking skills, he believes Ilia has more ways to win.
What is it about his skill set that you like more?
It's basically because Charles is going to stand in there upright, like you're saying, and when he gets inside, he's going to use that boxing, and Charles' head's going to be up, and Ilia's got a really good way of connecting with that chin on the inside. Really, really nice, just like what he did with Volk. You know, and I think if Charles doesn't get him up the middle with knees or front kicks up the middle, he's going to have a hard time with his boxing against him, and he's going to have a hell of a time trying to take him down. So it's going to be one of those where Ilia's got more opportunities than Charles does. But Charles can surprise us with his length, you know, and up the middle would be really, really well suited for him. And the kicks too, you know, body, head type thing, you know, low, high, you know, he could do really well with that.
So the stage is set for UFC 317, and now it's time to fight. Charles Oliveira promises to finish Ilia Touria, while Touria vows to make him pay. The banter will continue between the two fighters until the fight night, so subscribe to our channel to get more updates about this fight.